and welcome to the Plumis YouTube channel. We've got something a bit different for you today, a chance to discuss at some length the building safety issues facing the housing sector, and it couldn't be a more pertinent time. We're going to look at how innovation and new technology can help meet some of these challenges. I'm Fearn, a journalist and broadcaster specialising in social affairs, and I take a particular interest in social housing and in local government. So the questions we're going to be asking today are ones that I keep coming back to in my work very regularly. Joining me today, we have two people who are at the heart of this tech revolution in building safety. First, let me introduce Yusuf Mohammed. He is the co-founder and chief designer at Plumis. Can you tell me a little bit about Plumis and your journey with the company so far?
Okay, so my background's in product design and engineering. I like to come up with solutions that solve problems. That's what I've done my whole career. And Plumis was formed off the back of a course that I did at Imperial College London and the Royal College of Art. We set the brief that we'd like to make a difference in an emergency situation, and we really got inspired by talking to firefighters and remarked on how there needed to be more choice or more options for people to reduce the risk within their homes. It just so happened that the very first International Water Mist Association conference was taking place in the UK some weeks later, and it was just amazing. We went and spoke to a number of specialists, and we just thought, wow, this is a technology which is being used in Europe, but no one had really found a way to bring it into the home. So we've been keen and passionate trying to unlock that potential, and we've had some success over the last 15 years. It's installed in over 14,000 homes in and around the UK, and we're keen to see it picked up and adopted also.
So where was it being used in Europe outside housing? What other sites and uses was it being developed for?
So initially it was developed offshore. It was traditionally it was a marine application, but I think because a lot of sectors and applications saw the benefit, you'd find a lot of specialist applications, targeted water mist systems for something like chip pan fires or electrical service stations. So it was pretty well established, but it was really, we felt that there was really an opportunity to bring some of those benefits to residential fire protection. So now there's a host of manufacturers who are developing solutions that use small droplets to address fires. So
tell me about that design process. You were obviously still a student at the time. You're taking an emerging technology and converting it to another use. How was that process? Was it an exciting time to be developing something new? Did you feel like you were at the cutting edge of a sector that's going to really change the way fire safety works here in the UK?
Absolutely, it was and still is really exciting. The funny thing about it was that what we really did was try to connect the dots. So there were a number of established technologies or established methodologies of perhaps detecting a fire or addressing a fire. All we did was combine a number of these aspects and put it together in a new package, which meant it could be applied in a different way. Standards, naturally, I guess they focus on, or they create one sort of paradigm, and manufacturers would then follow that formula to deliver their solution. So what we wanted to do was analyze those clauses, analyze the objectives, and what we're looking to achieve from the standard, and see if there were alternative ways to get to a better or a different outcome using some of the same component pieces.
And how many years ago was this? The company's in a very different place now.
So we started 15 years ago. So it's been quite a journey, a lot of learning, a lot of talking to specialists. We've made mistakes. We've had to figure things out as we go. Along that journey, we sort of trained in the building code as me and my co-founder as fire engineers to kind of learn the first principles. It's been a significant learning curve, but I feel like we've come to a place now where we have a good understanding of the landscape and some novel ways at how we can offer something new.
And you're now at the point where you're about to start working in the US as well.
Yeah, that's been another journey with a whole set of different standards and expectations. You'd think fire is just fire; it's the same fire in the UK as it was in the US, but no, fire loads are different. The let's say the engineering principles that the assumptions which form their building code is different. So perhaps it's the expectation on what the fire service will do when they arrive. All these sorts of things are slightly nuanced. So we've had to learn a completely different language in applying it in the US, and then meet their requirements and their standards and work their system. So that journey has taken 7 years, and finally now we're at a point where we have that rubber stamp. We have a partner who's going to be helping us with a route to market, and we're excited to make a difference there as well.
And also here today is Robert Hearty, Commercial and Technical Development Manager at the British Standards Institution, better known by many of you as the BSI. Hi Robert.
Hi.
So how did you first start working with Plumis?
So yeah, as you mentioned, we're the standards company, although my involvement is with product certification. And I've been with BSI for 18 years in different roles in certification and testing. So I think it's been a little while ago, a number of years, I think about 2019, maybe 2018, Plumis approached us for product certification. One of my team members was involved in doing a compliance certificate for Plumis's fairly unique technology at the time.
Great, and you've been watching this as part of your, your brief around understanding how fire standards are changing, in the UK, and your role in supporting that.
Yeah, certainly. So, I mean, one of our mandates is just to deliver societal impact, and trying to help clients, help new technologies and safe technologies come to the market is really part of that. And it's really difficult where there's things that are unique. We use the standards that we help create. It's very difficult where those standards don't exist. And we've helped Plumis on the way to doing that.
So I want to start with a little bit of context, because it's a really interesting time for social housing sector, which is, I know, obviously somewhere, Plumis, you're really keen to work with more social housing providers. It is a complex era because we've had the Grenfell Tower fire, which was a shocking moment, both for the country and for the sector. And the inquiry that followed did expose quite a few issues around the way regulation as it stood had failed to keep tenants safe. And that's led to a few things, I think. One is obviously a big push on new regulation and guidance around safety, including the creation of the Building Safety Regulator. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about your relationship with that later. And we've also got great investment in staffing around safety. Great thing potentially for Plumis, because you've got a lot more people who can talk to you directly about the products that you're working on. So that's great to see. But I think it's also fair to say, and I'm sure Yusuf, you may have some thoughts on this, that there's a nervousness around innovation sometimes in social housing, which is completely understandable, I guess, given that context. Yusuf, have you found that building control and fire safety staff are dealing with a lot of new guidance and expectation now? And what are they reporting when you speak to them about their enthusiasm and appetite for new technology at this time?
So it's quite a complicated landscape. We've seen a whole host of changes which are taking place, and pleasantly surprised by how serious some of the changes are, and will definitely improve things. But a lot of the time I feel like it's going back to first principles, it's going back to basics, it's going back to the things that were there underlying, but just upskilling, making sure that everyone is competent and can deliver it. So I think because we're doing things differently, we've always had quite a burden of proof. We always have to be very clear in explaining what our product does, how it does it, why it does it, how it's been tested, all of these kind of elements.
Has that burden of proof risen in recent years because of what we've seen with the Grenfell inquiry and the increasing regulation around fire safety?
It has. There's been a big focus on the golden thread. For those who don't know, that's all around sharing information, making sure that information is available for approvers, for stakeholders, even the individual homeowners who might be living in those properties. So we've spent quite a bit of time making sure that information is easy to digest and is available, and is supported by third-party verification wherever we can get it. So we're constantly on the lookout for test houses who can validate, look at some of our material, and it can be part of that package so people can kind of feel confident using our technology.
And you mentioned that even potentially tenants or homeowners who are the recipient, I suppose, of the benefit of the tech, are asking for that information. Is that a new thing post-Grenfell as well, that housing providers are expecting their tenants to ask those questions, so they're preempting it, and you're being asked to provide that level of kind of understandable information for the lay user, not just the expert? Yeah,
that's definitely a new point of emphasis. I think you should have that information that should be made generally available just anyway, but fire is much more in the public discourse, and whether it is stakeholders or specifiers or individuals within their home, they want to understand the technology that's being used to protect them, the methods which are being used to protect them, and feel kind of confident that they are safe within their homes.
And how about that kind of anxiety among providers about trying something new? Do you sense that is increased, or is actually this kind of push for better fire safety, which is a brilliant and welcome thing, is it an opportunity now for kind of new tech and innovative solutions to actually be picked up for the first time?
Well, I think deviating from standard practice in any form, there can be some reluctance to do so, and that's been challenging for us, particularly when there's a lot of flexibility within the building code and the different solutions that you can use. Those who are doing it, they just want to feel confident. They want to be assured that they're making decisions that are validated, and that they have the evidence to back up the decisions that they're making. So it's put an onus on us to make sure that information is available and we're transparent about what we're doing.
It's tough to be the first mover, isn't it? So, Robert, how does the BSI fit into this? What does your work do to support, approvers and building safety executives in making those decisions?
There is a lot of scepticism in the fire industry, a huge amount, and kind of rightly so. So, where things haven't been tested, like time proven, then yes, there's a lot of scepticism.
And is that partly just about the number of organisations, the number of clients actually using it? So it's scale. So if you're testing it on a smaller scale by nature of the fact that you've got fewer people actually installed and using the product, then it's hard to compare with the traditional approach, the sprinkler or whatever area of safety you're talking about.
Yeah, and we talked about the responsibility. I mean, the way that the fire order works is that there's so much accountability placed on the responsible person. So yeah, there's going to be a tendency to kind of move towards those really time-tested solutions. So what BSI as the certification body is able to do is provide that testing, provide that benchmark where we are actually able to say, against this specification and against this claims, this product does perform. And that's only part of the risk assessment that those companies and those individuals were making, but it's something that's solid and something that can actually be a benchmark that can be used.
Do you find that, when you're working with clients like Plumis, that it's a necessary step for them, that actually providing that paperwork is really the difference between people taking an interest in a new technology and people just being too nervous to step into a new realm?
We work with various people in the industry, and it's usually driven by manufacturers that want to have something new to demonstrate it. because the alternative is just demonstrations. And the thing about demonstrations is they can be more favourable to the equipment, whereas where you are actually giving certification, it's to a specification, to a design criteria that will actually have some proven results against that. So it's very different to just either a manufacturer's own claims or something that's demonstrated which might not be applicable to the, other scenarios.
So tell us a bit about the process then that people like Yusuf go through with their products to achieve compliance with the British standard. How does it work?
An application for certification, it's about just demonstrating that it meets the requirements. So against the British standard or against any of the standards that BSI publishes, it will usually involve a technical file, and in that technical file there's various things, maybe test reports or calculations, documents that just demonstrate that that equipment meets those requirements, and often they're really stringent, the requirements. And then in addition to that, we'll also check that there's ongoing compliance as well. So there'll be ongoing checks, say, for the processes that are in the factory, just to make sure that there's that repeatability. And then for our things like our kite mark certification, that will be ongoing as well. So every year we'd audit that.
Are there any new challenges for new technologies in coming into that system? Because presumably you work with a large number of similar technologies produced by a range of companies, where it's all pretty much the same. And then with Plumis, you've got something that's quite new, not being used by so many organisations, probably not having been through this process many times. For you as the holder of that standard, how does that work? Do you have to start from scratch in designing the kind of the process?
Yeah, it's incredibly challenging, certainly for those new products. So the way that, and going back to how standards are created, is that they are kind of a standard. So yeah, it doesn't include things that are really kind of or at the cutting edge, because they perhaps didn't exist when the committee got together to review
create
those.
the standard in the first place.
Yeah, so the way that BSI develops standards is by convening experts from industry, whether it be the manufacturers or stakeholders from the various user groups. So it is a really involving, robust process, but where something is ahead of that, where there's new technology, and we want to be able to support that and offer certification, we need to be able to fill in some of those gaps as well. So yeah, incredibly challenging. The way that we'll often do it, or pretty much always do it, is utilise those established test methods, and perhaps use a slightly different application. So there'll be some grounding in those standards quite often.
Yusuf, obviously you've been through this process. Talk about it from your side of working with BSI to achieve this certification. What was it like from your point of view? What did you have to do to meet this standard in a way that they're creating a new standard for you in a way, I suppose, because this is the first time they've dealt with a technology like this one.
Well, funnily enough, I had that view initially that we needed to create a new standard in order to be able to operate. But what we've learned when we ended up doing BSI training as one of the committee members is that with a standard that's a code of practice, they're quite flexible.
Okay.
So a code of practice, as opposed to a technical specification, has flexibility. It might prescribe the objective, but it offers you a number of ways to reach it. So the first thing that we had to do was try and understand what the scope of the standards was and the objective was. And then the second part was to build up a technical case as to how we could meet the performance objectives. So that might be working with third-party fire engineers, doing independent testing. They would present a case that perhaps had foundations in fire testing that we'd done, looking at things like component reliability or performance, and building a case as to how we can meet the performance objectives within those standards. So we spent a lot of time and effort kind of building up this evidence base. We then present it in that technical file, and then there's a bit of back and forth between us and BSI.
So now you've got the certification. Has it helped spark new conversations with the social housing sector, with local authorities? Does it mean that there is this kind of sense of security now? Are the conversations you're having taking on a slightly different tone now that's in place?
So absolutely. There are definitely doors where prior, perhaps we presented the same technical file.
Same information in different
same
language.
information to them previously. Just the fact that now we had a third party who had gone through, they'd spent some time doing due diligence. It just meant that they could feel confident that if they invest their time looking into it, well, there's some reassurance there that some additional homework had been done. So it's definitely opened up some doors, but I would say our challenge still remains, and I think even part of the reason that we're filming this vodcast is because not everyone is familiar with the verification process. Even when we present a certificate, it's not always, oh well, I've never seen one of those before. Sometimes we get that question. So there is a continual conversation that needs to take place with all of our customers of, this is what we do, this is how we operate, and this is the evidence that we have to support its use.
So what are the common issues that come up when you say people aren't necessarily fully aware? There's those stumbling blocks that keep coming up. What are the common things that people are saying to you? Not just about, perhaps the language being something they don't recognise or the tech being something new. Is there something else going on about understanding the regulatory framework around it that keeps popping up?
I think because most incumbent manufacturers have been, I guess, following the same template for many years. Customers are very familiar with what their certificate looks like. They've, the due diligence, although that process is kind of repeated annually, perhaps when there's slight tweaks on the product, they don't really have to. They're not really stepping outside of the box. So the first thing that we often have to communicate is that this isn't a big departure from what you're trying to achieve or what traditional systems do, and that secondly, there is that flexibility within the guidance, within the building code, to allow this sort of innovation to exist.
So is there a misunderstanding about that? People often assume that the guidance, which is flexible, is in fact regulation. Is that a misunderstanding?
So Approved Document B is a guidance document, and it has examples of ways for you to meet building regulations. But it is just one method. So there are other guidance documents. BS 9991 is one, or you have a fire engineered solution, and you can pick a route as long as you can demonstrate that it meets the functional requirements of the building regulations. It's equally credible. What we're trying to do, or our challenge, is to highlight the lesser utilized methods. So the verification supports in that activity. It's just saying, well, look, this is credible, it's well established, it's been available for very many years, but it just doesn't happen as often.
But you have had some projects started with a number of previous local authorities, housing associations, particularly care homes and so on. So how are those projects working? And what are people who, both managers of those sites but also residents, telling you about how they feel about living in a property where Plumis or Timist is used?
Well, it's funny to be talking about this now because, we've been here for 15 years and we've got over 14,000 installations up and down the country, yet we still feel like a new product. Right. We still feel like an innovation because it just takes such a long time to get, everybody kind of comfortable and familiar with what we're doing. But we've installed to meet building regulations in 3-story houses, individual dwellings. We've installed in sheltered housing schemes in and across Lambeth, heritage buildings in Scotland, even in America as well. So we have numerous examples, and what approvers and customers really like is it AutoMist has a different set of attributes to a traditional system. So if there's an issue perhaps with the water supply, maybe you can't get access to the ceiling because there's asbestos, or perhaps there's a concern about water damage if a system was activated. In those particular premises, those attributes are valued and give the customer a different way of ticking the compliance box.
Tell us a little bit about, let's say, Lambeth specifically. What kind of, types of properties have you been rolled out there?
So we retrofitted it across a sheltered housing scheme. Okay. So these were elderly individuals. I believe the council was looking to upgrade the fire protection in these dwellings after they had numerous incidents where perhaps people had relatively small fires. And the council went for our solution because it could be retrofitted within a single day, and there were some initial concerns about if they were using an existing technology, they would have to have boxing on the ceiling in order for them to be a traditional system to be fitted, and that sort of visual clutter, let's say, into the room could be avoided using our solution.
And also, there's been a lot of discussion post-Grenfell about the needs of people, actually older people with limited mobility, perhaps disabled tenants, to be supported to evacuate. And actually, your solution looks at some of that. Tell me a bit about that. Not just about the fire protection side, but the kind of social side of working with social housing developers and local authorities, and the additional questions, I suppose, they're asking of you about keeping their tenants safe.
Yeah. So one of the key attributes of the product is that it can operate between 2 and 14 times faster than a glass bulb system. And that's because we're using sensors as opposed to a thermomechanical glass bulb. But that has an implication in terms of means of escape. So if someone is sort of trapped or can't escape from a property by themselves, then it gives them more time. It reduces the amount of toxic products that they might be exposed to. So this is part of the reason products such as this is quite well suited to individuals who might be a bit more vulnerable than the general population.
And so now you have got some clients working with you in those spaces, housing providers, councils. How can you help them talk to one another about their experiences? Because as you've pointed out, that hesitation around trying new things is often to do with a kind of herd mentality about following what we've always done to make sure we meet regulation, when actually this technology might be more beneficial. It might be a real step forward, both in terms of cost and quick retrofitting, but also in terms of managing safety. So are those conversations happening, do you think? How's that working in terms of, I don't want to say peer pressure, but you know what I mean, a kind of a reassurance from someone who's already been there and is finding it a really useful solution in their estate? So
those conversations are happening. The sector, people do talk to each other. Everyone's kind of looking over their shoulder, and over time we are slowly but surely working our way into more properties. It's funny, we spent a lot of time presenting case studies, even accounts of incidents where we've put out fires, where I can think of one we installed in a student accommodation block, and a
very high fire risk. Everyone, anecdotally as well as data driven.
Absolutely, and I believe there was someone was cooking some chips late at night. They fell asleep. The system, they woke to the alarm going off. The system was deploying mist. It put the fire out long before the fire brigade arrived. And our installers went in the next day, and they had to wipe down some of the surfaces. They checked the equipment, and it was reset and ready to go.
So tell me a little bit, Robert, about how your guidance documents fit in, because systems like AutoMist aren't specifically named in the approved document B and so on that Yusuf was just referring to. But as he said, they are certainly permissible. So would you encourage approvers and building safety staff to trust and use the verification certificate that you're able to provide when it's supporting new projects, when they're supporting new projects?
All I can really say to that point is that the certificates that we produce to really verify that equipment does exactly what it says it does is really useful for that risk assessment. And it still does need risk assessors to be able to apply that in the correctly. One of the key challenges with things like new technology is being able to utilize it, to apply it in the right way. So you mentioned just earlier some rather unique setups. So for those particular cases, the verification certificates, the compliance certificates that we issue do give the designers just that confidence that it does function correctly and that you can use that more unique solution for those applications.
Why do you think it's so important that we do see innovation in fire safety? I mean, this is something that Yusuf's dedicated his career to. I'll come to you next, but Robert, do you think that, what kind of benefits do you think new technology can bring to the fire safety sector and also to the housing sector and so on, property as an industry more broadly? Because we talk a lot about meeting the guidelines, but actually there's something more kind of tangible going on here, which is actually making people more comfortable, happier, feel more secure in their own homes, and protecting property, reducing insurance costs and all of that as well.
Risks are changing, so it's really important that there is new technology. For example, 10 years ago we wouldn't have things like lithium-ion batteries in our houses. And now there's lots of news stories about e-scooters spontaneously igniting when they're on charge. So innovation in the fire industry absolutely is needed. And there's also reason why we would need different and new technology, even for some of the challenges that face risk assessors, responsible people at the moment, given that our housing stock, our buildings are extremely old in the UK, and there's lots of different setups that make it very difficult for the right fire safety to be put in place. So innovation is absolutely needed for those kind of newer risks that are being introduced, and also just the difficulties in our current housing stock, our buildings.
I mean, you sort of mentioned retrofitting. When we normally think about retrofitting, we think about heat pump technology and insulation products and so on. But actually, retrofit is bigger than that, isn't it? It's about the safety issues as well. Do you think that that's the push to kind of retrofit our existing stock to make it fit for purpose is an opportunity for AutoMist?
Yeah, I think so. To sort of jump on some of the points which Robert made. We do have a rapidly changing landscape. We have an aging population, and we have housing stock which needs work. It needs to keep up to standard. When we started looking at where deaths and injuries were taking place from fire, you do a risk assessment, and it is particular vulnerable individuals in certain property types. So retrofit gives us a way of addressing that risk, rather than just thinking about new build, which is where active fire suppression systems, let's say, the onus has been on, I'd say, previously.
You mentioned the changing demographics then. Is that, that's a key part of the housing sector's work in the next 20 years, is to look at the types of people and their particular needs that they're going to be housing. Fire safety isn't always the thing that comes up first into people's mindset. They think about things like accessibility, they think about things like living on one level, bathroom access, lifelong, being able to stay for a longer period of time so that you're not constantly moving allocations around. What's your message to housing providers going through that process in terms of thinking about what you do as well, thinking about other risks, not just disability and so on, but actually security?
So even if I think back to some of those initial conversations with the firefighters, and it mirrors some of the conversations I've had with fire safety professionals, in that some of those firefighters said, we're probably going to have 4 fires in this particular block over here in this area, and we might have 2 in this particular type of building. That a lot of the time the risks were before they got bad, there was a couple of warning signs beforehand. Right. Someone had an initial small fire, and then it happened again, and then you had bad outcomes. So when I've spoken to housing providers, they often could identify perhaps 2 or 3 people that they knew of who, an intervention of some sort would be beneficial for them. So, there is a broader conversation, but there are sometimes very clear situations that could benefit from having some form of active protection.
So Yusuf, as you've just pointed out, housing associations, particularly also councils, are gathering a lot of data, quite granular data sometimes now, about their tenants, about their behaviour, about the performance of their buildings. How can that data be used? Is that a useful tool for you in terms of making the case for Automis, but also understanding a little bit about that sector that you're trying to break into?
Completely. I think data pretty much underpins everything that we do at Plumis. The reason that we've gone down the electronically controlled route is because looking at historical data, looking at fire engineering data, we found that there was an opportunity or an unmet need. And I know plenty of social housing providers who are doing the same. They're examining their data to find where there's shortfalls and opportunities to make an impact.
So that you're going to gather so much more, because we're entering a period now, hopefully, of rapid new development, large number of new properties being built, probably primarily by housing associations with government funding, and finance also by the sector's relationships with banks. This is a real opportunity when you've got hundreds of thousands of new homes being built in the next 3 to 5 years. How are you going to make the most of that?
Well, I think trying to signpost very clearly what Automis is and why it can be useful. For so long we've just had one solution, one type of way to protect a home that's been commonly used, and that's your traditional fire sprinkler. But their properties are varied. The populations can be quite different. So all we're saying is that it's another tool to add to the toolbox that individuals can consider.
And as we're entering this new period, building safety is going to be at the forefront of minds as these new properties are being developed. What does that mean for the kind of future of building safety, do you think? Do you think there'll be a new period now where verification of the services that you provide are going to be more in demand as development becomes much more rapid, thankfully?
Yeah, my hope is that regulation is going to be a lot clearer, and the responsibilities are a lot clearer, certainly.
Because there are still some common misconceptions, aren't there, around regulation that ought to be tied up during this period of extremely fast-paced development.
BSI, we're not a market regulator. We are very much an enabler in that we provide certifications so that manufacturers that have solutions are able to demonstrate that they function correctly, and that the people using those, purchasing those products, so that they can implement safe environments, can also have the confidence that those products are safe and that they function properly.
What are the misconceptions you'd like to see overturned in this period where everyone's focusing on getting homes built?
Well, I want people to just understand that there's options. That's really one of our key objectives. Working with BSI is one of the ways in which we're doing that, but we've also worked with a number of fire engineering firms to produce evidence and technical documents which support the use of our product. And ultimately, we'll continue to do this sort of research because it gives us more confidence and helps us to not only understand our technology, but we can provide that to sort of specifiers and other people in the sector as well.
And so not every organisation that comes through the process for certification achieves it. It's a very tough, rigorous process, isn't it? What's the kind of attrition rate and how does it work?
Yeah, I'm not going into the attrition rate entirely, but yeah, I mean, it's a really tough process, and we pride ourselves on being really tough when it comes to the certification that we issue. It has to be really robust, and as part of that, there are applicants that don't quite make it, and that's particularly true as well with the compliance certificates, because there's that extra step where the onus is definitely on the manufacturer to demonstrate what the requirements are, the suitable parts of the standards, and then to go on and demonstrate that with testing and all the other verification that's required. So any organisation that has actually gone through that process voluntarily as well it's a huge undertaking. So that just speaks to the quality of products when you see that certification.
And your site also provides a service where you can type in the certificate code, you can see all the details about exactly what verification's been achieved, and building safety officers can refer to that at any time.
Yeah, so we've got a Kite Mark directory and a way that you can validate those certificates, as well as contacting BSI with the details of that certificate.
Thank you both so much for joining me today. I think we've all learnt a lot, and to building safety officers and building control officers, I think this probably gives you some food for thought and a chance to really share new ideas and technologies within your organisation and between each other with your colleagues in other organisations within the sector. I'm Hannah Fearn, and to find out more about Plumis and about AutoMist, get in touch with the team by this channel or on social media, or by dropping them a line by email. Thank you and goodbye for now.